How is everybody today? This is Michelle from Erie River Publishing. We are live today with a very exciting day talking to 4 authors of our newest release, with Blood and Ash and with Bone and Iron, which are our dark fantasy collection. So this collection is 14 amazing stories, all based on, the prompt really was, give me a dark fantasy story about elemental magic. So it needed to be fire, water, earth, wind, spirit, those kind of things. And we wanted it to be character driven and dark, and the range that we got on this anthology was just spectacular. So both of these books have 7 individual stories in there, and they're all larger stories. They're not like a small, they all range anywhere between 5,000 to I think 15,000 words. So you're getting a good chunk of world building. So we're really excited about this collection, and we hope that you guys are as well. We've already got some people saying hello. So good morning, Need. Nice to see you again. And hi, Peter. You can see and hear me. This is fantastic. Sometimes this doesn't always happen that way. So that's awesome. Hi, Kat. Sorry. I don't know why I wanted to call you Kate, but I did. And then there's, so thank you. Hello from Canada. We've got people from all over the world joining us today. We have Joel Hunt, Jonathon Mast, Sam Fletcher, and Lauraine Blake will be our authors that will be joining us. But first, before we jump into that, I did want to just give us a little bit of Erie River. So Erie River is a small independent publishing house based in Ontario, Canada. What we do here is we really promote and highlight and publish the dark genres. So we do horror, dark fantasy, and dark fiction. And we want to really highlight and promote those indie authors that write them, because there's so many fantastic new voices out there, and we want to be able to lift them up for everyone. So we hope you enjoy our book. So Erie River, where you can find us, we've got erieriverpublishing.com. That's our website. If you're an author, that's where you can find all of our calls. We have a call right now for a horror call, for It Calls from the Doors, which is all based on not just a literal door, but it could be something behind a door, like evil behind a door. And it could also be like doorways to different things. So a portal, a rip in the dimension, something like that. So we've got that call going on. And in a few months, we're going to have another dark fantasy call. It's our LGBTQ I call for, we're looking for those positive main characters. So character-driven story, dark fantasy, and that one is all Fae related. So we want something like Fae fantasy melding of characters. It should be a lot of fun, so we're excited about that. Well, on to what we're here for, to talk to our authors. So Joel is going to be our first author up. I've got a thumbs up. Here he is. Hi, Joel. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, it's nice seeing you. You are here. You're here from England. You're in England right now, right?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. Yeah, Derbyshire.
Oh, that's perfect. So it's your story. Tell us a little bit about your story. Like what book is it featured in, and what's going on with it?
Yes, so the book features in with Blood and Ash, and my story is called Fire and Wisdom. And the general kind of overview is that in this world, there are a group of kind of ranking high-profile individuals called wisdoms. And a wisdom in this world is essentially a wizard plus a monster hunter plus a scholar. So they're kind of a bit of all of the elites, and they are very, very snooty about it. And so we follow one particular wisdom Loris, and his fire elemental familiar Red, as they are sent out on a couple of escalating missions on behalf of the Grand College.
Well, that's exciting. I really enjoyed this one because it was, it seemed like old school, almost wizardry, but it also had a nod to like kind of climate change and like what's going on in the world as well. So I really enjoyed how you put that in there. So I think people are going to hopefully enjoy. We're going to have a little snippet read from you very shortly, right?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. I've got one lined up.
Excellent. Now, before we do that, and it's only because we were talking about this before and I forgot, is we have a giveaway. So we're doing a live giveaway today. So what I'm going to do is anybody that comments during this live event, I see you guys, Dimitri, Catherine, Tim, Neen, and Dave. Who else is there? Oh yeah, David said hi, and Peter. Okay. So I'm going to assign all of you guys, while he's reading, I'm going to assign everybody a number from 1 to however many people end up joining the live stream. And then if your number is called at the end, I'm going to put it in a little bucket. I'm going to pick it out. You get a prize. I might even pick more than one prize. So stay tuned. Don't forget to comment at least once if you're on, and you will be entered into this fantastic giveaway. And then now we're going to give away part of your story for the masses. Speaking of giveaway.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to remove myself from the stream. And then it's all up to you. Are you ready?
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, here.
Thank you very much. So the extract that I've picked is just a little bit of a way into the story. It's not too far in, but essentially Wisdom Loris and his familiar Red have just gone to a village to try and take out what was supposed to be a demon. And when they got there, they found out that actually it was a much less intimidating threat. And so they've just finished dealing with that supposed threat. And he's on his way back to his carriage from the Grand College, which is essentially a house on wheels because they're powerful wizards. So yeah, this is where we continue. Reaching the other end of the square and finding it empty, he appeared along the main road. His driver had moved the carriage a distance away from the crowds, no doubt to attend to the wheels in peace. Spotting him at his platform, Loris beckoned the man over. "Have you reapplied the runes?" he asked. "Yes, my wisdom," said the driver with a bow. "We're ready to set off as soon as you command it." "Good. We'll go momentarily, but first I want you to catch up with Elder Merrill and inform her of the college's suggested donation." "Yes, my wisdom." The driver trotted off, and Loris strolled up the road towards the carriage, eager to leave this meagre town behind. As he walked, a gentle gust wafted his hair and caused Red's spines to flicker. Strange. The trees dotting the roadside were motionless. Loris raised his eyes to the sky. It took him a moment, but he found the gust's source perched on his carriage. Its talons were as sharp as the breeze, eyes roiling like mist. Nothing else of the bird was visible, so he took a few steps closer to frame her against a cloud so that her shimmering outline could be seen. "Wisest Emerald sends her regards," said the familiar, her voice an echo in the wind. Loris bowed. Red flared up, bathing his master's face with prickly heat. "It's a pleasure to see you again, Venter," he said. "I would be grateful if you could inform my wisest that the reported demon has been dealt with. As it transpires, the threat was nothing more than some lost elementals." Venter appeared, for the briefest moment, to smirk. "The word of peasants is rarely blessed with insight. However, before you return from today's..." The bird paused, sampling the next words in her beak. "Great victory. Another matter requires your attention. Genenbar has seen a significant rise in Fey activity. You are to travel there immediately and connect with the territory's resident wisdom, Sharik. She will aid your investigations. Deal with what threats you can and inform the college of those you cannot." A bead of sweat rolled into Loris's eye. He shuffled Red further down his shoulder to escape some of the excess heat. "I have been travelling for some weeks, Venter," he said, "and this has placed you close to Genenbar. Do you take issue with your instructions?" Loris bowed again. "I act at the command of my wisest," he said. "Very good. Wisest Emerald wishes you safe travels and a triumphant return to the Grand College." "Safe travels to you also, Venter." "Goodbye, Venter," chirped Red. The bird considered him with a fierce, misty glare, then spread her wings and flapped. She rose faster than Loris's eye could follow, and when he again tried to catch sight of her against the clear blue sky, he saw only a formless ripple that spread out to nothingness. Loris pursed his lips. "Don't do that again," he said. "Do what?" asked Red. "Spread your flames. Every time we encounter Venter, you puff yourself up and give off more heat." "Oh, do I?" "Yes, it's embarrassing. They'll think we're trying too hard to impress them." Red's flame shrank back down. "Sorry, Master." They settled back into Loris's study, and the wisdom prepared one of the 3 meals that he could put together without a servant. The driver, who now had sense enough to knock first, interrupted while it was cooking to hand over a sizable coin pouch that had been donated by the town. Loris dismissed him and tossed the coins into a nearby drawer. With that, the carriage began its gentle rumbling, and they were on their way to Genenbar. For the remainder of their evening, Loris bathed, then changed into his study robes and read more from Wisdom Willifer. When night fell, the pair retired to their bedchamber. Loris settled into his 4-poster bed, while, on the nearby table, Red climbed into his glass lantern. The familiar's porcupine form dissipated as he relaxed into his unrestrained state. "Good night, Master," said Red. "Good night." Loris pressed against his pillow, wishing he were in the more comfortable bed of his college chambers. This one barely gave him room to spread out. It was like a quilted coffin. "We want to impress them, though, don't we, Master?" asked Red. Loris rubbed the bridge of his nose before glancing at Red's lantern. "I beg your pardon?" "Venter," said Red, "and Wisest Emerald." "You're still thinking about earlier?" "Yes. Well, we do want to impress them, don't we?" Loris rolled onto his side and watched his shadow flicker in the lantern's glare. As Red's flames billowed back and forth, Loris's shadow shrank and grew. When the light caught his back, it filled the entire wall with his image. "We will," he said. And that's going to be the end of my extract.
That was very interesting. So do you want to give us a little bit of a... I know you said that was read at the beginning-ish.
Yeah, not to... I think that's... it's maybe about like a fifth of the way into it. Or thereabouts.
Yeah. So we're starting to get into the action in that section. Yeah. So very cool. I really enjoyed that book. Now, where did the inspiration of this story come from?
So this one actually came, I do this thing called VSS365 on Twitter, which just stands for a very short story. And essentially every day you're given a prompt and you just try and write a little story in a single tweet to match that prompt.
Yeah.
And this story actually started as one of those. So it started, technically I think it was 2 tweets, but it started as a tweet response. And all it was Loris and currently unnamed fire familiar seeing a wild elemental. And I don't know exactly what it was that gave me the idea, but I had this idea of familiars being something that used to be this giant wild elemental and was distilled down into something more compliant and obedient that served the magicians. And all the tweet was the familiar asking if it used to be one of these great wild elementals, and Loris saying, yes, that's correct. My school kind of tamed you and distilled you down. You're welcome. And then he makes the familiar thank him for condensing him and basically stealing away this wild power.
That's dark.
Yes, yeah, he is less of a jerk. He's a bit of a jerk, but he's less of a jerk in the full version. He's not exactly the same character as in the tweet.
No, that's a really interesting way. Like it's exciting to see how we all get like inspiration, right? So that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us. And yours is in with Blood
and Fire. No, not Blood and Fire. Blood and Ash.
Blood and Ash, right? Okay,
yes,
that's what I thought.
yes.
So that one was in Blood and Ash. So if you are interested in grabbing that one, you can grab that one at Blood and Ash. So in case people are wondering, because they might not be or might not have heard before, I am assigning everyone a number that comments. So as long as you comment, you're getting a number. And then I'm going to stick that number in this giant vase that I have. I figured it was exciting enough. It was exciting. So we're going to put it in this, and then I'm going to pick out winners from it later. So I'm going to remove Joel so he's not like, thanks. But yeah, so we're going to stick all those numbers in this puppy, which was a wedding present years ago from my aunt. So thank you, Aunt Susan. I really love it. It's from a Canadian glass blower. Anyways, we're going to stick all of the numbers in there. I've got 11 so far. So if you're wondering why your name is beside a number, it's because you, just for putting a comment on, have now been entered to win prizes. And some of those prizes might actually be stickers being sent to you. Some might be digital things. We do have an Indiegogo campaign. So for those, I should prove putting them in there. So we do have an Indiegogo campaign for those that aren't aware. It's just a crowdfunding thing that we're doing in order to help boost the amount that we can pay per word for our authors, because here at Erie River, we really do believe that it's imperative that our authors are getting more than just exposure. Like, these are nice to do when they're fun and they're exciting, and we're doing blog tours and making sure we're pushing these books as much as we can, because we really think that these stories are standout and they deserve as much as we can give. But to make sure that we can actually pay our authors as well without going bankrupt. So if you are interested in helping out and checking out our Indiegogo campaign, feel free, you can look it up. And that's our little ticker right there of what that is. But our next one is Jonathon. Jonathon, are you ready? There we go. All right. Boom. How are you doing, sir?
So far, so good. I have an insanity of children, but they're not in the building right now, so I'm okay.
That's fantastic. I've locked mine in the basement, literally.
Nice.
I'm like, stay down there. Stop screaming. Here's some toast. Goodness gracious. But tell us a little bit about the story you're going to be reading us, and the name and which book was it in again? Because
this one is in With Bone and Iron. So the other one.
The other, the other one from the one we mentioned first, but yes.
Yes. And this story is Dowser in a Dead Town.
Yeah.
When I saw the prompt, elemental magic with dark fantasy, I started thinking, okay, what can I do that's a little bit different? And I ended up going to the American West, the Old West, and doing something just a little different. And I thought, if you're in a desert, what is the worst elemental magic to have? And I thought, water. If you can't create it, if you can only use what's there, using water in a desert is useless.
Yeah.
And so I had the starting setup for who is going to be the main character, a water user in a desert. And it just flowed from there.
Yeah.
That wasn't intended to be a joke.
Yeah. I thought it was the only Western dark fantasy book we got. It was almost magic realism, where it was taken on. It was set in for me, it felt like it was set in our world, but our world, if it was magic. So I thought it was just the whole idea of it. I thought it was really interesting, and I'm really glad that we got it. And I think we've had some really positive critiques on it so far. So yeah, do you want to take us to where you're going to do the little snippet from, or do you want to tell us at the end?
Well, I was planning to read just the first few pages.
All right, so let's get in there.
All right.
All right. Okay, I'm going to take myself out, and then it's all yours.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being here.
Vultures circled above the town. Adobe structures shimmered in the desert heat. Probably not a good sign, Darren muttered to himself. His horse didn't see fit to respond. The man wore his long dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His pistol sat in the holster at his side, spurs jingling as his horse plodded along the broken dirt road. Mountains rose to the east of the town, but otherwise an empty plain lay before him. Dry bushes tried to convince him that there was life here, but he knew better. This was a dead place. That was a dead town. Now it was a dead town anyway. Darren was probably too late to save anyone. Again. He rode down the silent main street, puffs of dust wafting up with each hooffall. Wind breathed against sun-bleached adobe buildings that lined the street. Nearly white light burned from the sky, so he and his horse cast a black, deep shadow. No one sat in front of the saloon, and no children complained from the quaint schoolhouse. No sheriff watched from the office. Darren directed his horse to the town well situated on the right side of the street, where a low, pale wall of brick surrounded what had once been a fountain. He dismounted, taking off his hat and waving it at his sweaty face. He stumbled into the wall, leaning over it, but whatever had fed the fountain was stuffed up with dust. He sighed, putting the hat back on. Darren raised spread fingers over the fountain, closing his eyes and concentrating. Something below the fountain rumbled ever so slightly as water started to flow. The interior of the fountain turned to mud, and then muddy water. Darren plunged his hands into the liquid and lifted them to his face. He took it in, his horse joining him, and the man gasped after taking a long drink. He uncapped a canteen that was slung over his shoulder and filled it, and then did the same to another that hung from the saddle. After drinking again, he finally turned and sat on the well's edge, looking around the town. Nothing moved. He shook his head and pressed his lips together. Taking a handful of water, he splashed his face, then stood and made his way across the street to a building that was clearly a saloon. The horse elected to stay by the running water of the fountain. Tables stood outside under a pergola, where chairs were tipped in the wind and half buried in dust. Darren placed his hand on the grip of his pistol, ready to draw. He stepped through the door and into the darkness within. Sand. Sand everywhere. It was heaped in dunes against the bar and against the far wall. He stepped around to see behind the bar. Several men lay half buried in the dust. Some clutched pistols and one cradled a rifle, but none breathed. Darren took off his hat and nodded. "Gents, sorry I got here late," he rumbled. "If it means anything to you, I plan on making it right." The corpses elected to keep any response to themselves. He placed his hat back on. Some stairs on the other side of the room led to a second story, so he made his way up as his boots thudded on the wood. A hallway lined with doors led away from the top of the stairs. Each door was closed. He opened the first to find a bedroom unoccupied other than sand, and the second was the same. In the third, he found two women covered in dust that dribbled from their mouths and eyes. He removed his hat again. "Apologies, ladies." He knelt. "Any of you religious?" He reached a hand out toward the third of one which bore a cross. "Don't," a woman's voice whispered behind him. He spun, his pistol drawn and ready. A young woman leaned against the doorframe across the hallway. Her pale blue dress was torn in many places, and her face looked like she'd been buried in dirt. Her long, dark hair had taken on a dusty color. He reholstered his weapon. Not many survive a dusting. "Don't touch my mother," the young woman said. Wouldn't think of it. Just wanted to give a good burial if that's what they'd want. Plus, it would help keep the varmints out. He stood a pace away as he inspected her dirty face. I haven't stopped the well. She huffed a rough laugh. How? Ain't no one can unbury a dusted well. Some of us can. He stepped around her and headed back down the hall. The woman slowly made her way after him down the steps, and when she spied the gushing fountain, she rushed across the street. Thankfully, the horse had the good sense to get out of her way and let her collapse against the wall. She buried her head in the water, drinking greedily. When she finally returned to the surface for air, Darren asked, "You the only one to make it through?" She rolled herself over and sat on the ground, back to the pale bricks as she squinted in the piercing light. Yeah, we deal with dusters all the time. They come in, make a fuss, and then ask to be paid off. Sheriff's a rifleman, though. Usually one shot and he can take them out easy enough. This one, though. She shook her head and swallowed. Just blew into town. Didn't make any demands, just whipped up the air and killed everyone he could find. He didn't kill you. Before answering, he didn't find me. Darren raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. The woman looked him up and down. You law? Darren shook his head. She gave a half smile. Well, that's good. Wouldn't be so good if some man came in here just to arrest me. And you are? She shrugged. Laying low. Ah. You're a douser, ain't you? Darren took a bandana out of his coat pocket and dunked it in the water, tipping his hat off his head and wrapping the bandana around his black hair. Might say that. She shook her head. And you're chasing a duster? Darren shrugged. So you're insane. He offered a half smile. I've been called worse, ma'am. And you'll have to buy the book to find out how the rest goes.
Good job. That was great. Yeah, you have to buy the book. It's a shame none of us in this group actually have our physical copies because only one of us got it in the last one because we had some issues getting the book actually like put together. Not issues, just it was very like last minute, unfortunately. But they look so awesome. At least on the computer. So I just want to see them in real life. It's like my main goal right now. But yeah, no, that was a brilliant read and honestly a great book. We've got a lot of people. Someone here it is from Rachel, who is another one of our authors, but she read this one. She said, Dowser and the Dead Town was my favorite story in Bone and Iron.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just thank you.
Yeah. And then I said, it was a really good story. David said, I loved it too. Such a great vibe, great genre mash. And I agree. Like, I really enjoyed that Western flair to it. It was one of the only Western we got. And I just loved it. Do you write Western often?
Actually, not much. Another publisher that I work with put out a call for weird Western. And so it was just in my mind a little bit.
Yeah, it was something that was there.
And so I've got some stories in that book that's coming out this summer.
Oh,
and
that's exciting.
I was just in the mode. So
yeah. And we've got Rich that says, sounds great. Dimitri goes, nice. And then Luke also said, nice. So thank you so much. Okay, well, we're going to say goodbye for right this very moment. Thank you so much. We'll bring you back on for a question and answer at the end.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. All right. So again, if you just tuning in with us, we are doing a live giveaway. So you make a comment in the bottom. I give you a number, and I put that number in this fancy dancy giant blown glass vase. Oh, I thought it would be like, but it didn't. It just rustled all the paper in there. Okay, so we've got that. So our giveaway today is going to be some digital products as well. If you're following us on our Indiegogo campaign, you know that I have created some different stickers. So maybe a sticker or two will be featured as one of our giveaways, maybe a little bit of a swag bag kind of giveaway. So if you would like to be entered into our giveaway, please put a comment on here. And I will make sure to put your name and a number below. It looks like we've got, oh, Jonathan, who just read, has made a comment, but you're not being entered. Okay, so up next, we have Sam Fletcher. Are you ready? Okay, I'm just, yeah, there's a thumbs up. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Hi. Well, thanks for being here today.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story and what book it's actually featured in.
Yeah, so it's called Morgan's Story. It's in With Bone and Iron. I think it's the second story in there. And yeah, so basically it follows this kid, Morgan. He's 16, and he goes to this school which teaches like ethereal magic, which is kind of my take on the spirit element.
Yeah.
And his dad's the headmaster, but his dad is utterly focused on his adopted brother, who shows up in just like one small part of it. And so he kind of goes out looking for, he finds his family elsewhere. And where he finds it in is in his friends, which are these goblins in this like organized crime syndicate. And then the other place he finds it in is his girlfriend, who is the daughter of the main enforcer, who's really biased against that crime syndicate. So he lives in this like complicated mess of all of his family kind of likes and dislikes him. And so it's just kind of what happens from there.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a really interesting story, and I thought it played very well in, like, there was a lot of parallels that I saw, like, from just kind of the atmosphere that we are living in right now as well. So I thought it was, I hope when people read it that they can look at it like that as well. Anyway,
Sure, yeah.
that's what I got out of it. I don't know if you did that way. You're like, no.
Well, oppression in general is kind of like a big theme in it. There's like many sort of layers.
Yeah,
it's part of an extended world, and so I don't know if
okay, so this is a part of an extended world. I was going to ask you that. Is it a different, like, it is like a larger?
Totally, yeah. So I've written about Morgan before. He's a character I've had for a long time, but this is the first. He's usually a grown man, so this is the first time that I wanted to talk about his childhood, which I've never. And also, it's the first time that he's the protagonist. Usually, because he's kind of a bad guy, so usually he's kind of on the more evil side. But this time, I was like, I really want people to have empathy for this kid. So that was kind of the goal. And in that world, I don't want to go, I guess, too deep into the premise, but basically the whole, I guess, the parallel in like the Harry Potter Muggles, but the difference is that the non-magic people are sort of an oppressive force. So they're kind of actively or inactively forcing everybody in hiding. And then within that, there's obviously all these biases within the magic world. And one of them is definitely against pretty much anybody but the human sorcerers is going to be kind of lesser. And so that's kind of a big part with the goblins, and that's why they kind of want to retaliate and form all these organizations and things like that. I feel
like I need to read this world now.
Yeah, it gets complicated for sure.
Well, yeah, it sounds really interesting. Okay, so you're going to drop us into this book. Did you want this story? Did you want to give us a little preamp? Well, do you know what? You can figure out how you want to do it. I'm going to just let you go and either tell us a little bit before you start reading or just start reading.
All right, sounds good.
All right, I'm going to take myself out of the stream and enjoy.
Yeah, so this is a little bit like partway after the beginning. I would say like the inciting action was when so Morgan gets in a pretty big fight with one of the goblins about the girl that he's dating, and then so this is like he pretty much beats this guy up, and then this is what happens right after, where the head of the syndicate wants to meet with him, and Morgan, of course, thinks he's about to be punished. So this is that. He ignored the bright beams of light coming through the enormous windows of the classroom the next day. As the professor droned about the theory behind group chants, Morgan wondering when he'd get to use them in practice, a sporadic tap interrupted this thought. Morgan once again glanced at the window. A crow had landed on the sill, pecking at the glass. Annoyed, Morgan thickened the air around the bird, vibrating it until it shook off. And then it returned. Tap, tap, tap. Morgan stared at the thing until he saw something below it. Cedro, with a braced arm and a bandaged head, stood alone on the grass. Morgan stood up quickly. I have to use the bathroom, he announced before throwing himself between the desks and scooting out of the room. He joined Cedro out in the courtyard. What are you doing here? He asked. Petrie sent me. He wants to speak with you. The words sliced into his ears, followed by a nervous pause. What? Petrie wants to speak with you. Do you know where he lives? Look, whatever this is, we can work it out between the two of us. Should I tell him you refused then? Morgan looked him up and down. He'll kill me. He's going to kill me. Cedro looked at him blankly. Go, said, get out of here before someone sees you. Fine, but go see him. It'll be a lot worse, you know, if he has to come find you. Cedro left, Morgan lingering to look up at the classroom window at the school, lost in thought. He went around the back to the narrow path through the trees leading to Peachy's cottage. Nervousness panged him with each step. He'd never been this deep in the woods before. His father had warned him of all of the criminals who lived within, those fearing the public eye. The thick evergreens almost fully eclipsed the sun, only allowing specks of light to poke through. They seemed to dull all sound as well, except the twitter of birds. Morgan listened to his heavy breath persist, his steps crunching the needles on the ground. This all made the trek much worse. The trees eventually opened, revealing a small cottage on the other side where a stone chimney rose above a moss-covered roof. Morgan took slow steps before lifting the thick door knocker. After a moment, the peep hatch slid, and out came Peachy's croak. Morgan Bain, come in. When the door opened, Peachy stepped to the side to allow his guest to come through. Even with a slight hunch, he stood a head taller than the boy, the tallest goblin Morgan had seen. Peachy eyed his uniform. I'm sorry to interrupt your studies. Morgan entered slowly, both hands at his waist but ready to make a move. I was just rustling up some grub for myself, said the goblin. He sat down at the end of a thick oak table. Wood scraps and sawdust laid around the place, enough to assume Peachy built it himself. Even his shirt, rough and patched, had an air of homestitching to it. Would you like anything to eat? Morgan glanced at the raw meat on the goblin's plate. The elder began to eat with his hands, wedging skin and fat between sharp teeth. I'm okay, Morgan said. He couldn't take it anymore. Listen, sir, if this is about the fight, please, Morgan, you needn't brag. Excuse me? I knew you were strong before you threw Cedro into some bricks. Probably had it coming, huh? What is this about, sir? Fervor was murdered this morning. Do you know who that is? Morgan shook his head. Perhaps the greatest weapons manufacturer this island has ever seen. The most talented goblin one, at least. Peachy slammed a wooden device on the table with a loud thud, sliding it across to Morgan. He crafted this sprig. Morgan examined the thing. It looked like a wand but was thicker, with an orb on one end. This tool is the simplest way to end a life, Peachy continued. Quick and pain-free. Takes a talented mind to run one properly, of course. With your power, you wouldn't need to use one at all. Morgan slid the sprig back. Fervor is an enormous loss in our community, you can imagine. This is several years set back, and besides being an unjustified tragedy, the monetary loss is incalculable. Was it graft, sir? Morgan asked. Peachy cracked a wide, slow smile. Indeed it was. Graft Agazaris. His grin faded promptly. I've let this go on for too long. We need to send a message. Need him to know that we aren't as powerless as he may think. Morgan's words were softer than usual. What sort of message, sir? Peachy stood up and fetched a small chest off the ground. Out rang a piercing metallic thud as he dropped it on the table. His right hand, his wand hand, in here. Morgan was tense. I don't know. He's a top enforcer. I have no experience. Oh, but you left my experienced killer bludgeoned, said Petrie. It must be you. Rumor has it you have the most insider information on his whereabouts. I don't know, said Morgan. He'll recognize me. The others have doubts about you. Say your allegiance is split, said Petrie. I've vouched for you before. I feel your anger, your thirst for justice. Don't make me look like a liar, Morgan. He pulled a black key from his shirt pocket with a neck piece attached, sliding it across the table to the boy. If you do this, you're one of us. Petrie didn't allow much time to calculate. Morgan closed his eyes for a beat, thinking of any new reason to decline, but upon opening them, nothing came. He nodded. It's the right thing to do, isn't it? Petrie nodded. He's lucky we haven't retaliated much sooner. Morgan put the key around his neck. He stood and grabbed the chest on both ends. By week's end, understood? Yes, sir, Morgan said. Petrie, the goblin corrected him. Good luck, boy. And that's it for now.
That was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed this story. Like I said, it just spoke to a lot of different things that you could probably relate to, or you had an understanding of. So I thought it was a really interesting way of putting a story together. And now that I know that it was actually a backstory, I'm going to need to read where the story actually goes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Sure.
I just wanted to see if anyone, because we've got someone that, doesn't going crazy. Oh, sorry, my system kind of started glitching, and I was like, oh, someone's typing something, but I don't know what they're typing. So Neen said, very cool reading. So, well, thanks for reading. That was great. I'm going to, and then Luke is saying these are all sounding really great, and they are. It's a really interesting collection of different stories, and it's just awesome. So I will say goodbye for now, and then we'll bring you guys up for a question and answer right after we speak with our next person, who is Lauraine. But before we bring her up, again, we are doing a live, and I keep reminding myself it's got to be a live giveaway. This is not the prize. This is all the numbers that are in here. So you make a comment, I put a number beside your name, or I put your name down, and then I write a number beside it. I let you know. Then I pull the number out, and then you get a prize. So if you are watching right now, make sure to comment anything. It can be, well, try to make it like something relative, like not anything weird. Well, you can do weird. I'm all for weird. But we have that coming up. So that's going to be right after we have our question and answer period. So right now we've got Lauraine. Are you ready? Okay, yeah, it looks like she's saying yes. All right, Lauraine, how are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So where are you coming from?
I'm in Wiltshire. I'm in the Cotswolds at the moment.
Oh, perfect. Well, I hope you're having a great evening so far.
Thank you.
Yeah.
These readings have been great. It's been really nice listening to everyone before me.
I know, it's really, I love hearing authors say their words, because they know where to emote where I would not know where to emote, and they have like the feeling behind it. So I love listening to everyone with their stories. Now your story, tell us a little bit about it. I know this one is in with Bone and Iron, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So Fury is interesting because I saw your call for Blood and Ash, and I thought, well, that sounds really, really like my 130,000 word novel. And you had a 15,000 word cap. So I thought, well, yeah, I'll write something a little shorter then. And thus Fury was born. It's a prequel. So it's not my characters from later, but it's my world.
Yeah.
The world building was already done, but it's set maybe 250 years before, and it has a little bit of an explanation as to why some of the things are the way they are later on, which I thought was quite a fun thing to do. I really enjoyed writing it. I don't like any of my characters. They're all mean, but yeah, it was really fun to write it. So
sometimes those are the best characters, though,
yeah,
to read.
More interesting.
That's perfect. So where are you gonna was there a inspiration? I guess the inspiration was your actual novel itself.
Yeah, so for Fury, definitely it all came from The Wilder Light, which is my series, and so the novel series in the whole. But that has been inspired by many, many things. I couldn't pin down a single one. It's been traveling, it's been stuff that's been in the back of my mind since I was a child. It's other people's stories and things that I've read and like, oh, that's cool, or you know. So I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly where the inspiration for that's come from. It's just there, sort of thing.
Yeah. No, I understand. Like writers, we tend to get inspiration. We like everything.
Yeah,
right?
Art as well. Anything. It can be absolutely anything. So
exactly. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to you, and you either give us a little intro or just drop us right in the story. You have fun with it.
Okay. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It was the middle of the night when the bells of Ilfir Castle clattered into life, wrenching Cade from a restless sleep. Damon Kai on the roof. The cry went up beyond his bedchamber as Boots rushed past his outer door. Damon Kai on the roof. Cade surged from his bed, relieved that he had not bothered to undress. The room was dark, shadowed wrongly without the lamps his powers usually kept burning, even as he slept. The oak panels taunted him with their inky sheen, and his drapes jeered like foul-mouthed spectres. He cursed bitterly as he buckled on his boots and sword. "Sire, stay in your room," Lord Cavendish barked at him as he joined the throng in the upper corridor. It made him feel like a chastened child, not the damned king of Bassane. He would not. "Arm the tar pit. Flame the arrows," Cavendish bellowed towards the upper courtyard, which sat atop the enormous flat roof at the castle's rear. Then he swung back to face Cade. "My Lord Cadrian," he growled, "how do you suppose to tell your people that you have no fire with which to defend them?" They were near to the huge doors to the courtyard, surrounded by men racing forward with swords in hands. Some wore chainmail, but most, like Cade, only wore the clothes of court. "You want me to hide like a coward?" Cade eyed the older man coldly, as the night air tinged with tar smoke caressed his skin. "You have no heirs, sire, no brothers." There was no respect on the Lord Commander's face, no compromise. "I will not shy from battle, and I am your king, so you cannot make me," Cade snarled. He could see the words foolish and headstrong marked out in the creases around Cavendish's eyes, but he didn't care. Spinning on his heel, he left the man in the corridor, then powered through the doors, with his sword raised. He was sick of being treated like a child, a lesser, and he was terrified that, if he did not solidify his power despite what Evelyn had done, he'd be fixed forever as Bassane's weakest king. He could not let the Ilthrin line fall. It wasn't just fire that made Ilthrin superior. They were superior. He dipped his blade into the tar pit and set it alight, even though it was physically painful to do so. Lighting his blade as a mortal would was the basest humiliation. Yet, to preserve his power, he would debase himself. The throne was, after all, the only thing he bowed to, and, proving Cavendish wrong, was worth the sacrifice of dignity. Above them, he could see the Daemon Kai, the nightling, arching membranous black wings before it shattered the air with an unearthly shriek. All around, his subjects clustered and urgent commands rang amongst them like the striking of a bell. He didn't let them get a good look at him, avoiding both scrutiny and questions as he set off, fiery sword in hand. His boots reverberated sharply against the stone as he dashed up the steps to the highest roof. Flaming arrows overtook him. They lapped at the shadows around the beast, making it snarl, then cut off when Cavendish called a hurried ceasefire. At once, Cade felt all eyes on him. All, including the nightlings. Those eyes were beady black and vicious dark as it looked right into him, through him. It was as if the Daemon Kai knew Bassane had lost its fire, that the hot edge of Cade's power had been watered down and blunted. He hollered as he raced for the thing. It leapt up and backwards, then lurched away from his burning blade. Only yesterday he could have ploughed a stream of fire into the beast from far below and raised it from the sky. Only yesterday he could have protected his people. The shame of it was considerable. "Fixing witch," he cursed beneath his breath. The anger gave him strength as he launched himself forward, thrusting his blade into the air. It flew. By the slither of earth magic he still held, it flew. His blood spoke to the metal in its awe, commanded it, and so it obeyed. Flames struck the nightling across its underside. It howled, then crumpled, thudding onto the roof. Cade's sword lay well over a man's length away, a useless streak of smoking steel. But he had his boot knife. He drew it and advanced on the foul creature. How dare it attack him when he was most vulnerable? How dare it? He drew a sharp breath. Fetid smoke filled his lungs, a cruel reminder of all he'd lost. Then, with the adrenaline of battle coursing through him, Cade slashed the demon's throat. Black blood sprayed, thick and dark and stinking. It coated him, anointing him king of the night, as the Daemon Kai vanished in a cloud of ebony smoke, vanquished, gone. Cade collected his sword, satisfied, then composed himself. He was not to shake. Ilthrins did not shake. It took him a few more moments before he was ready to descend to the lower roof. By the time he did, the upper courtyard was completely full. His court cringed from the sight of him, from the dreadful gore. Good. Cringing was good. 3 cheers for our king. Cavendish took up the cheer with all the enthusiasm of a scolded child. Hip, hip, hurrah! Hip, hip, hurrah! It echoed 3 times as Cade walked straight for him. The Lord Commander's eyes were tight, disapproving, as Cade took some of the dark ichor coating him and smeared it off across Cavendish's face. Hip, hip, hurrah, Cavendish, he simpered coldly, then turned and walked away, in part because he badly needed a bath, and in part because his stomach was threatening to betray him and spill his guts in front of everyone. Betrayal. There was a lot of that going around. If he ever found Evelyn, it would be very, very likely that his vengeance would be bloody. And if you want any more, you'll have to read it.
Exactly. That was great. Yeah, I really enjoyed. I love just the imagery that you used within there. We even had we've got needing shivers with every mention of the night wings. Brilliant. It is.
Cool. Thanks.
There we go. Really love the idea of earth magic flowing through the metal of a sword. Just such a cool visual idea. It is for sure. Perfect.
Thanks,
Well, thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it was. Yeah. Well, no, it was. It's a great story. Like it's. I really enjoyed how the essence of the fire that you put in there and everything else. It was a great read and a great story. And I hope that everyone is able to like grab their copies. If you are looking for, David said excellent, and then we had some from
Thanks.
Luke. Kat says, "Woo, great stuff." I hope I had the right inflection for that. So we're going to add everybody else back onto the stream. So everyone get ready. Sorry, I just threw you on there, Joel.
Yes, sir. I'm ready. It's good.
Sometimes I ask, sometimes I'm just like, bam. But no, great job for everybody, you guys. It was we got from a Dimitri, these were amazing guys. I think it's just supposed to say faxing. Amazing. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on Facebook. I think we'd be fine. But no, that was, so if anybody has any questions for our authors while we're here, we've got some time. We can do a question and answer period for anyone. If you want to, just add your comment in the comments for your questions in the comment section.
I've got a question actually.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that fair? I want to ask Lauraine, the fexing, is that something you came up with, or is that?
Oh, it's actually is a swear word because
Is it?
Yeah.
Well,
it's
I'm sorry.
it's
I'm sorry.
Synonym for the S word.
Okay. That's new by me.
But I
Thank
have
you.
probably usurped it a little bit, stolen it for my own.
For your own purposes.
Yeah. It
But
just feels more fantasy.
Creating that kind of lingo and using it on your own, taking language that isn't normal, it's fun for me, and I enjoyed hearing that.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Yeah, I'm a big fan of all swears. To be quite honest. Just my thing. So if you are interested in purchasing them, we've got the little things below that will you can click on buy, or you can find it on Amazon. And if you want physical copies, you can get them from any of your local stores. You can just ask them and they can order them from there, or you can buy them from Amazon, the Amazon Prime. Or you can even go to our website, and from there, if you put in an order or you ask for a quote, I can get you a 15% discount off the total. Sorry, off of the retail cost, and then there's shipping on top of that. So, but yeah, it's really kind of interesting. Where do all of you read and write fantasy, or what's your favorite genre to read and write? Let's start with Lauraine. You're right there.
Yeah, it's definitely fantasy. I've always liked fantasy. I was introduced to it actually by a family friend when I was only, I think, about 9 or 10. And so it's always been about magic and wizards. And I kind of kept it secret from my friends because it just wasn't cool. But
when was fantasy never cool?
Well, it is now. It's just, it was. So
I'm just being, I'm joking.
But yeah, normally dark fantasy. I can't quite cope with horror, to be honest. So.
Oh, you can't do the horror?
I can, but just not before bed.
No, I understand. Like sometimes, not every genre is for every person. And like there's certain genres of horror that I cringe at. So like everything. How about you, Joel? I know you do a lot of different genres, don't you?
Yeah, so I used to struggle to kind of define exactly what it was that I liked, but I came across, I think it was probably last year, I came across the term speculative fiction.
Yeah.
And so just in case anyone doesn't know, speculative fiction is essentially any story with any element that isn't of real modern Earth. So it broadly encompasses fantasy, science fiction, horror, most forms of horror. But I like that more because I do like fantasy, but I'm not as big into the kind of high fantasy Tolkien-esque style. I like more, well, in fact, things kind of like pretty much everyone here has done, which is not as kind of straightforward traditional fantasy. I like mixtures of genres, and I also like science fiction, but I'm not as much into space operas. So broadly speaking, kind of mash any genres together that don't necessarily belong, and that's where my my heart lies.
All right, perfect. How about you, Sam?
So yeah, I'm kind of similar. I definitely write a handful of genres. Also write a lot of like nonfiction and poetry too, aside from fiction. So it's kind of, and just like that, it's hard for me to pin down what I like to read. But I think I would kind of agree that like I definitely kind of lean towards fantasy and science fiction, but my favorite ones are the ones that are not, yeah, like not space opera, not high fantasy, more just kind of like, what is this? Like magical realism is a good one, or like science fiction that's just like so slight that it's like this couldn't happen in real life, but like maybe eventually it could, or you know, so that kind of thing, which kind of makes you, it's fantasy and science fiction, but kind of makes you like strain a little bit, or like is believable in like its own way, in its own reality.
Yeah. Well, there's so many different genres or like degrees of fantasy, right? So you can almost find there's definitely something for everybody.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Jonathon, what about you?
I write speculative fantasy, sci-fi. I dabble in horror, not a whole lot, but I do it. But when it comes to reading, I used to focus so much on speculative. I thought I felt a little tunnel vision. So in the last years, I've very intentionally tried to broaden my horizons. Reading some nautical fiction, some detective, some Western. I just backed on Kickstarter some old pulps that I'm just doing some different stuff. So trying to broaden my horizons a little bit.
Wow. Are you enjoying it? The
Yes.
ride?
For Christmas, I got a reprint of the original Zorro stories, or some of them, because there's more than can fit in one book. And that was just a blast.
Yeah, very cool. So we have one question from David. I'm going to post it, and I want you to think about it first, because we are going to. I'm going to actually do the draw because So his is favorite fantasy series, please. So I know we all have lots of fantasy series, but so think about your favorite one, and in the meantime, I'm going to draw 3 names. No, 3 numbers. Let's see the first number. Number 11, which I believe is Rachel. You're getting something, Rachel. Congratulations. I will connect with you later. And I really am like, well, there's a bunch of them in there. Oh, this one. Wait, no, that had 2. I want to make it fair, guys. Number 7, which is Luke. Congratulations, Luke.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 12, Sean. You're the one that just figured out how to make a comment. I think
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you 3 are our winners. So congratulations. Rachel, Luke, and Sean, I will be connecting with you after this. I'm going to try to send you a digital message, direct message, personal message. I'm going to PM you. And we'll connect, and I'll figure out how I can give you those. So for the question is favorite fantasy series. Let's go. Jonathon, you were just talking. Try it again.
Well, I'm going to cheat and say 2. Lightbringer by Brent Weeks.
Yeah.
I very intentionally not read the last book of that yet. My wife did, and she's it's been fun torturing her by saying, I didn't read it, you can't give me spoilers yet. And the second series, Temeraire by Naomi Novik, which is French and British nautical war with dragons.
Yeah, very cool. All right, Sam, what about you?
All right, it's really impossible to pick one favorite. But what I do want to say is I feel like at the last one, it wasn't the last like stream thing. It wasn't like super representative of YA, which I think is so important in that genre. So I just like want to shout out like because those are things like not so much these days, but definitely when I was younger, what really got me kind of launched was like Percy Jackson, Aragon, Dragon Rider, those type things. So it's not so much what I read these days, but definitely that was what got me going for sure.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that because it is sometimes you forget about the ones that got you started, right? How about you, Joel?
Well, on that note, that it's going to sound like I'm kind of riding on Sam's comment there, but I
only read YA.
No, so obviously, there's kind of more adult fantasy that I've read, but the ones that mean the most to me are the first kind of series that I really got into. I couldn't not mention His Dark Materials, which has such an enormous influence on me, and this story in particular. The idea of having human beings with talking, shape-shifting animal companions that sit on their shoulder and make snide remarks is entirely down to my love of His Dark Materials. But I think my favourite fantasy series would probably be the Bartimaeus series by Jonathan Stroud. Almost modern, but essentially in a world where wizards are the ruling class and they maintain their power by summoning powerful demons and binding them to their will. But the majority of the story is told from the demon's point of view. And he is intensely sarcastic and he absolutely hates humans.
Sounds like my kind of demon.
Yes. Oh, he is fantastic. And he breaks the fourth wall constantly with, he's got footnotes throughout the story where he's just talking to the reader. I would very, very much recommend it.
Oof. Okay, I'm going to have to write that one down.
Good luck spelling it. Bartimaeus.
All right, what about you, Lauraine?
There's a lot, to be honest. I'll work backwards. At the moment, I've just been introduced by a really good friend to Anne Rice, and I don't know why I hadn't found her before. Now, this is not really my normal thing.
Anne Rice?
Right. I hadn't actually discovered this type of vampire genre fiction because it's not really... It's kind of the birthplace of this sort of vampire genre fiction. I really, really like it. It's beautifully written. It's quite literary, which I'm kind of quite into right now. Yeah. Before that, it was probably it was probably Sarah J. Maas with her Throne of Glass series, because it's young adult, again, like you guys are saying, some of this young adult stuff's really amazing. Leigh Bardugo as well, with her Six of Crows, is just incredible. It's so well written and thought out, and we really like that one. It's kind of quite dark and gritty. But there's lots before that as well. As a kid, it was David Eddings. It was, as you say, Joel, His Dark Materials. There's a lot.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, which is why it's hard to pick just like a standout one, right? Yeah. Okay, I think we've got a couple more questions, and then we're going to kind of sign off because we're getting to the end. So as all your books feature magic, I am interested to know how you deal with the contradictions magic brings. How do you make vulnerable, believable characters who aren't overpowered? Is anyone writing vulnerable, believable characters?
Well, I think
it depends on your story,
right? Give them a limitation. Make there be something they can't do, which is fundamental to what they're trying to do, and then they're probably good.
Very true. Have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like talking about the elemental thing, that's kind of because at least in like in my world, it's like, everyone has a different type of magic, so it's going to work better in some circumstances, not as good in other circumstances. And also, even within each element, there's
rules.
Yeah, like some people are very like precise and like sort of in their head, and other people are just like blasting. So it kind of works in different scenes and who they're with. And I think there's ways to make everyone vulnerable in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Know the rules of the magic and put your main character in a spot where they have to fight back in ways that they're not used to. Like we did with water elemental in the desert. You can't do a whole lot.
Yeah, especially with I think it also depends on your fantasy too. When you're doing dark fantasy, you want it to be grim, and you want it, and sometimes there isn't a happy ending. So sometimes your vulnerability is kind of the downfall of that character, even if it is the main character. So you definitely, but knowing your magic rules is a big one, especially for like indie authors or authors that are just starting. Is make sure that you're writing your fantasy rules down and that you understand them, but that you're also making your audience understanding, and you're not contradicting your rules at all when you're writing it, because you can't say one thing and then do another, because readers remember and then comment. So.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, because this is something that I actually started feeling self-conscious about, because in my head I'd got ways to limit them, but I think so. Essentially, the main limitation for my characters is that most magic in their world comes from scrolls, and they have to physically hold the scroll and repeat the incantation, and that scroll dissipates and the magic kind of comes out of it. But he has this spell bandolier, so essentially he has a limited number of scrolls that he carries with him on a mission. But because of the relatively limited word count, essentially it didn't make sense for me to go, all right, and these are all the scrolls he has at the start. So I got halfway through the story and I was like, well, he's just pulling out the scroll he needs at the time for the story. So I did feel a bit self-conscious that having him be able to just pluck whatever magic he needs at the time, but in a longer piece of fiction, I think I'd have liked to have played with him not being able to then refill that bandolier and eventually running out of magic.
Yeah.
Which I think would hopefully be something interesting to play with.
Well, yeah, like it's your story. You can make it. You can evolve or expand this into something else, right? So.
Can I jump back into this?
Yeah, of course.
I was going to say as well that I think for me, it's the psychology of the characters. I think it doesn't matter how powerful you are in any world, whether it's magic powers, whether it's physical power in, like, if you're a king or somebody who's powerful in a common mundane world sort of sense. If you, in your own mind, make stupid decisions and do stupid things, you're going to limit your own power and you're going to make a mess of things. And I think that's really interesting to me that, in a fantasy world, you have an infinity of possibilities, but if you make them human, then they're not going to be super powerful, because humans generally do stupid things.
Yeah,
not intentionally, it's just the way it goes.
It's very, very true. A lot of people make dumb decisions all the time. Okay, last question, slightly weird question. Let's see what it says. But since you've talked about favorite genres, favorite books, what are standout books, favorite books, genres you don't normally like as much? Gosh, what about those particular books do you think make them stand out amongst a genre you don't normally gel with? Okay, so if you've read a book not in the genre you normally like, is it a standout book? What makes it stand out?
I absolutely loved And the Mountain That's Echoed. This is set in Afghanistan, and I think I just love the characters and the fact that this is about children being separated from parents, and about, in some ways, survival, and it just showed a different culture. And I was quite interested in how it was actually written, like the physical phrasing and things were slightly different to the fantasy genre. So I actually really loved that book.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I haven't read that book yet, but right now I'm in a pigeonhole of what I'm able to actually read. Has anybody read anything that's outside of their genre, that just off the cuff, that they could think that really stood out?
So one of it's not necessarily a genre that I avoid, but it's a standout because it's one of my favorite books of all time outside of speculative fiction, and it's The Color Purple.
Oh, okay.
And just for people who aren't aware, essentially it's a very raw and emotional insight into a woman's life as she's grown up in the American South, black woman who faces just appalling adversity, and it's all written in letters that she's writing to a couple of characters. I couldn't really say exactly who because it changes and might be a bit spoilerish, but that there's no speculative fiction elements. It's just just a woman's life, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's a book that kind of changed the way that I viewed stories written in particular dialects, because it's written in her vernacular, stories written in the kind of found format in the Albion letters, and it is so emotionally powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is. It's definitely it's something that if you had a perspective going into it, it's definitely shifted after you've read it.
Yeah.
So I agree to that wholeheartedly. Does anyone else have a book that they really enjoyed? Maybe not. Yeah.
Well, I've got one that, going from that very serious, very literate.
I know. I was going to say, you might not have to be like so impactful.
I'll just go a different direction. So I mentioned that I really tunnel vision on speculative a lot. And a couple of years ago, I picked up at a half price books for $1, A Cowboy's Life, and I forget who the author is, but it's an autobiography of a real life cowboy who ended up working in Hollywood, and he just wrote down his life story. Yeah. And it was so cool reading, not a Western adventure, but just, yep, I was on the trail and this is what I did, and that's what I did over there, and it was very, very straightforward, and it helped me realize, okay, this is what life was like, as opposed to what's so often presented. If you watch even realistic Western movies, they're still adventures, they're made for the viewer as opposed to this is what happened.
Yeah, of course. You got to be entertaining. But, well, that's interesting. I can say I've only read one Western and I can't even remember what it's called.
Yep.
It's not my genre. But it was a good book. My friend made me read it. But how about you, Sam? Any books that stand out that's completely not what you normally read?
Yeah, well, that question's kind of hard because I'm not sure I read so many genres that I don't like. I feel like I have a lot for like the opposite of like books in the genre that I like that I don't think are good. But one thing one thing that does kind of come to mind is I feel like in the world of like vampire fiction, there's a lot of kind of misses just because it's been done so much, and and pretty much any opportunity that I have to shout out I Am Legend, I'm going to take, because most people are familiar with it with the most recent movie, but the book is like kind of a separate plot, and it's very traditional vampires. It's not like the new movie was kind of vampires, but it was like zombies and very sciencey, and that's not how the book was. And the book's like, I think it came out a long time ago, like maybe like 1950 or something like that. But it's just really, really amazing in like the vast world of vampire fiction, just how he draws from the lore, but it's a very sort of literary seeming science fiction book. And it's just really amazing. Like maybe one of my favorite books. So yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, I'm going to have to look into that. Like that isn't a genre that I do normally read, and I haven't read it yet. So. Now I'm going to have to read that one. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming on and like sharing your stories with us. We hope, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching us. And I hope if you're only catching us at the end, I hope that you're able to go back and listen to everybody do their little snippet and introduction to their story, because these are some fantastic stories in these books. So we hope you're able to grab them. But yeah, so just thanks for coming in and supporting, and thanks so much for sharing your words with us, guys. I think everyone did a great job, and I'm really, really excited about these books. I think they're amazing, and I hope you all get your copies soon. We're gonna have to do some unboxing videos of everyone going, we finally got them. So you can show them off to everybody. But yeah, thanks so much. I'm going to do our little mini video of our brand, and yeah, it was great seeing everyone.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.